Hey everybody, I'm Jesse, and welcome to another edition of Gen X Thinks. And today we have a member-inspired edition. Our buddy over in Norway, Leif Gulliksen, has suggested a video on the topic of patterns of obedience, crisis control, and the new normal. Right? So this idea that the government and the powers that be construct these situations, these emergencies, these catastrophes in order to control us, right? To implement their policies. And even if they're not orchestrating these things, they're definitely using them to implement control and manipulate the masses. This is just obvious. They've said it out loud. I think it was Hillary Clinton that said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste," or something like that. That might not be a direct quote, but it's something like that. Never let a good emergency go to waste, something along those lines. And they do it time and time again. I don't know how you feel about 9/11. A lot of people, that's a touchy subject for a lot of people. I personally, I have questions about it, but I have questions about everything. So if you believe that Osama bin Laden did it and that's it, bottom line, then no offense meant. I question everything. Anything that the government has a hand in, anything that the government is involved in, I have questions, because it's always something's always weird about it. Questions are unanswered. The mainline narrative never seems to add up. But regardless of the fact of how you think it happened or why you think it happened, the results of it are undeniable, right? We've got the TSA now, the Patriot Act, mass data collection, this kind of stuff, right? And the TSA, they have never caught a terrorist, not once. In what has it been now? 24 years? Since 9/11, and the TSA has never caught a terrorist. All they have done is confiscate people's screwdrivers and pocket knives and Leathermans and stuff like that. And before that, all the years before that, we flew around with whatever, we'd have a pocket knife in our pocket or a tool in our bag or whatever. Some people, like to have a screwdriver for whatever reason, some kind of weird reason. They like to have a screwdriver with them. It just makes them feel good to have a tool, and so they can do something when they get to a hotel. You never know. But we didn't have rashes of crimes being caused being done with screwdrivers in the 70s and 80s and shit. That stuff just didn't happen. But a lot of people carried stuff like that with them on their flights. So my point is that all these things are basically harmless. Not 100% of them, of course, but most of them. But we have traded a lot of freedom, right, for a little bit of safety, a tiny bit of safety. Maybe one guy every 10 years might have done something illegal with the screwdriver. I don't know. But it's something like that, I'm sure. The Patriot Act, all this stuff that they're monitoring us, and we know about this kind of stuff, right? The stuff that was in the Patriot Act, that they're allowed to listen to our phone calls and all this stuff now and monitor us and collect our data and all this shit, right? But what all was in that Patriot Act that we don't realize, that we don't know about? That's the question that I have. What else is in that Patriot Act? I've never read the whole thing. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't understand some of it. Because they do that on purpose. They put stuff in these bills in legalese that normal people can't understand, because we haven't studied that shit. We'd have to have some kind of lawyer to read it to us and break it down and explain it to us. Not because we're stupid, but just because we're not educated in that. There's a lot of stuff I'm not educated in. I don't know a lot of the terminology in auto mechanics or, horse racing. There's just all kinds of shit that I don't know about, that I haven't studied. So all of this stuff has been done, and our freedoms have been taken. Now we're being monitored and spied on and shit because of 9/11. Whether you believe it happened by Osama bin Laden or you believe something else, no one can deny that the repercussions of it, right? They never let a good crisis go to waste. And sometimes, in my opinion, they create the crisis. Whether this specific event was or not, I don't know. But I just don't put it past them. I don't put much past the government. Let's say that. And a lot of these things, just like the income tax, but a lot of these temporary measures, right? They're supposed to be temporary. But once you give the government or any institution control of something, they never release it ever. They never give it back to the people. Income tax was supposed to be temporary, a temporary measure. I think it was 3% or something like that to help or whatever. And look what's happened with that over the last 100 years. All these temporary measures that the government inflicts upon us are never relinquished. Okay, and that's the same thing at the local level with toll booths. We vote on having a toll booth in there for 10 years to pay for new roads, which we're already taxed for, but we're talked into voting for a toll booth, and it's supposed to be gone in 10 years. But hell, 30 years later, it's still there. It's still taking our money, still taking our time. They never give it back. They never do what they say they're going to do. Measures are never temporary. They're always permanent. Always. And the whole 9/11 thing, it instilled in us a fear of Muslims, right? In America anyway, in the United States, a distrust, a fear of Muslims, of Middle Eastern people. And this is that's kind of a gray area for me, because I see this Sharia law, and I see nowadays they're importing them by the hundreds of thousands or something. I don't know the numbers, but a lot of them into all countries of Western civilization. Now they've already pretty much got us to distrust these people. Now they're importing them by the droves, and this Sharia law and all this shit, which goes against the values of Western civilization. So there's a real animosity there between the peoples, right? And you can't get over that. And I don't know that that the distrust is unwarranted. I don't know. I'd love to say, oh, they're all great people, and that, but when you look into Sharia law and see what that shit says, you can't swallow that shit. You can't abide by that shit. Not as a free person in Western society. That stuff is not okay. And most of us, we just hear the word Sharia law, and we have the propensity to project, right, our values onto that. We just, okay, it's Sharia law. We think of Western civilization laws, and it's not. It's nothing like that. So yeah, and the values there are completely opposing to ours. So that's a tough subject. I mean, we're all supposed to treat each other decently, and we're all supposed to, love our neighbor and all this. But when they come to our home and try to force these weird laws and customs down our throats, it creates animosity and a lot of times fear. So what are you going to do? Especially after 9/11. And we all lived through that and everything that's happened after that, including the war on terror. And we had, 20 something years of war after that? Just continuous, unending war. And it was always an unseen enemy, right? They were just always out there lurking, ready to inflict terror upon us and our families, our countrymen, our neighbors. They're just always out there. At any minute, they could inflict terror. They could, radicalize normal people here in America. They had a magic ability to just reach out and radicalize people in America and get them to start attacking their neighbors and stuff. All this weird shit. So, yeah, and that was a real thing that kind of replaced the whole Cold War fear of Russia nuclear war thing, right? As soon as Bush declared that war on terror, everything just kind of shifted away from the Russians and toward the Muslims and the Middle Eastern people. And in that war, it kind of became the new normal. To use drones, to use these drones in war, and just inflict civilian casualties with drones. I mean, I heard about that years ago, this stuff in Yemen when Obama was drone striking in Yemen. I remember hearing about that stuff, seeing it, and that it just became okay. Hell, he won a Nobel Peace Prize, drone striking civilians. So, that kind of shit is crazy. I mean, it's insane, but it becomes the new normal. It becomes what we live with, what we accept. It's just normal. Then we all remember 2020 with COVID-19. That's fresh on our minds with the lockdowns and the restrictions and the mandatory vaccinations and stuff like that. In a lot of states anyway. None of that stuff was prevalent here in Florida. But I heard about a lot of it in other states. And they just locked down businesses, chained doors to businesses, chained them shut. Business owners would show up, small business owners would show up for work and find their doors locked shut, chained shut. So they were just put out of business by the government. Yeah. And all this, and then not only that, but the media inflicted division on that, right? That may be the longer lasting effect of it is how divided we became. Trust the science and, horse warmer and all this shit on one side. And then, freedom and rejection of authority and autonomy on the other side, right? And people were really divided over that. And rightly so, in my opinion. You should have been free. You should have been free to do what you thought was best for yourself and your family. But dissenters were labeled as dangerous, anti-vaxxers, all this, and they were going to get everybody killed if they didn't get the vaccination. No matter what you really did in that situation, you were wrong, except for going along with the mainstream. Anything else you did was wrong. You were demonized and labeled as dangerous, a danger to your community, a danger to your workplace, a danger to everything. If you didn't go along with what you were being told to do, and that sprouted from that, grew this whole thing about trusting the science, right? You got to trust the science and defense of the science. So all these people who got in line and did what they were told to do, all of a sudden they found themselves in the position where they had to defend science. Okay. And that put them in an awkward position because science says that men can't give birth, right? And that women cannot impregnate that kind of stuff. So they're supposed to trust the science, and they're beating that drum, but a lot of science rejects a lot of, their ideas. So that put them in a weird position there. And also on the other side, that, you're saying don't trust the science, but then there's science has done a lot of good stuff for humanity. So that just added to the confusion and the division, the in-arguing, and the infighting, and that whole thing rose up out of that COVID-19 situation. And it just wasn't good for either side, to be honest. It wasn't good for either side. All of Western civilization paid the price for that. But also we have the climate crisis. Now, whether or not it's a real issue is debatable. Okay, is it a real problem? A lot of people say yes, it is a problem. Now, I personally don't know of any casualties of this climate crisis yet. I've never heard of any kind of now act of God, if you will, is blamed on climate change, hurricanes, wildfires, whatever you name it. It's blamed on climate change now. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to distinguish what actually is climate change and what isn't. And then on top of that, you have to figure out what is actually driving the climate change. Okay? So, just for the sake of argument, let's say that climate change is a real thing. It's sped up because climate change is real. There used to be an ice age, so many of them. But let's just say the speeding up, the climate crisis. Okay, climate crisis is a real thing. Let's say that the climate crisis is a real thing, and that it is because of carbon, right? It's carbon emissions are causing it. Now, just for the sake of argument, let's say that. Now, the problem there is that the government is using this for control, right? Carbon taxes, limiting travel, this kind of stuff, but only for the unwashed masses, not for them. Now, they can have their yachts with 8 diesel engines in it, and they can fly around on private jets and do all this stuff and just dump carbon into the atmosphere by the metric tons, literally. And that's okay. But it's bad if you, commoners, dare drive your little Honda Civic to work. How dare you? Right? And then you get the whole thing where we're supposed to have electric cars, but the electric being produced is being produced by burning fossil fuels, by coal, and so that doesn't make sense. Why should I buy an electric car to cut down on my carbon if I'm just getting the electricity from the production of carbon? That doesn't make sense. So a lot of it just doesn't make sense. And this is being promoted through guilt, right? You just don't care about the planet Earth. You don't care about the environment. You don't care about anything if you don't buy into this whole climate thing, right? It's just, you're just a horrible person. So they guilt people into buying into this, whether it's wrong or right, real or fake. They guilt people into going along and buying electric cars and the wind turbines and all this stuff, supporting all this shit. And they haven't changed anything with all this stuff they've done, even though let's say they've lowered the carbon footprint of the United States by whatever. They're by shipping our jobs overseas to China. China has increased its carbon footprint 3 times, 4 times, 100 times. I don't know, but they've increased their carbon footprint by by multiples of what we've decreased. So the overall on the planet Earth, the overall carbon production has increased because we've shipped all our jobs over to China, and now they're just building factories and coal plants over there, like it's their job to pollute the planet with carbon. So yeah, none of it makes sense. It never does. It never makes sense. TSA doesn't make sense because they don't catch terrorists. All they do is pat down old ladies and shit. And, the carbon thing doesn't make sense because we're not reducing the carbon. And there's always been wildfires and hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff. So none of it ever makes sense. That's the main problem I have with it. It never makes sense. And they use this confusion and this guilt to centralize control. All right. And a lot of ways we see that is with the advent of all these green technologies. Okay. And their ability to be tracked and monitored. And, if you're green and you agree with all this climate stuff, then you have to be on one side, right? You can't be on the other side. You have to be on the side that supports all this stuff. So then you're more likely to agree with all the other stuff they support. That is about control, because now, all the stuff that your friends talk about and, is stuff that came from the media, came from the government. It's manipulation, it's control. So a lot of these ways, a lot of these ideas, these problems, these questions, you have to pick a side, right? Because you can't be all woke, climate, transgender, and all that stuff, and be hanging out with me or my buddies, right? My family. So you've got to be over there on the other side, that kind of stuff, and that's the kind of division I'm talking about. In that division, in that manipulation is control. That's the heart of it, is the control, the centralized control. They use all these things, the fear, the divisiveness, the hatred, to control us. There's no better way to control somebody than to scare them, than to fearmonger. And then cultural inversion. Now, the left has basically taken the place of the old far right. They just changed the details a little bit. They are the most racist people on the planet. They just switched the colors. That's all. Right? That's all they did. They just switched the colors of the people they hate, of the people they want to strip of their freedoms, the people they want to control and punish. They've just changed the colors around. That's all. But they're still the most racist people on the planet. And anyone who disagrees with them must be punished, must be ostracized and pushed out of the group. It goes back to what I was just saying earlier. You can't be in that group. You must be ostracized, right? And anybody who dares think for themselves, who dares use logic and question any of this stuff is labeled as dangerous, as the enemy, right? And you're just supposed to go along, toe the line, and accept what what the government says, what the media says, and fall in line. And if you don't, you're punished. And that leads to censorship. Either, they're shutting people up that dares contradict them or any of their beliefs, or people silence themselves. They self-censor in order not to be punished. And when you have these big companies who are subsidized by the government and this kind of stuff, then you must self-censor in order to be heard, right, at all. And that's where we're at today. And we'll see, sometimes my videos get censored by Google or YouTube, which is owned by Google, which is owned by Alphabet. But sometimes we're censored on here, and sometimes we're not. I don't know, but I don't know how that works. But I know that a lot of the stuff I said here today is I'm not supposed to say. Right, I'm told when I made my YouTube channel that I'm not supposed to say this stuff. I'm not supposed to talk about this stuff. But self-censorship only goes so far. You can only live with yourself for so long. Biting your tongue and trying to keep quiet on things before you feel the need to speak your mind. And I do a lot of that. I skirt around things I really mean to say, hoping that I'm understood. And it's either that or I won't be heard at all. So yeah, I'm guilty of self-censorship, and I know exactly why people do it. Because if you don't, then you're silenced completely. So we've got to do something, right? Either that or just fall in line with the rest of them. And another one we had was the war on drugs. I don't know if that's just kind of faded away. You don't hear that anymore, but we had the war on drugs. And for decades, we had a war on drugs. And basically what that did was put a lot of people in prison for a victimless crime. Right? If a guy wants to smoke weed or whatever, and just for your information, I don't smoke weed. Never have really liked it. I have in the past, but I don't on a regular basis. I haven't in I don't know how many years. Just because I think I'm a chill guy, I'm a relaxed guy, so weed just really puts me out. I've become a zombie, and I just don't like that. Not my thing. My point in saying that is that I don't have a problem with people that smoke weed. I don't care. You should be able to smoke weed all you want. If you're a grown adult and you want to smoke weed, I don't see why anyone would want to stop you. You know what I mean? But they imprisoned I don't know how many millions of people over weed for decades there. And why? Why? So they could fill prisons, which incidentally are a lot of them are privately owned, and they have to. The government signs a contract with these prisons, guaranteeing that they will keep them at 90 or 95% capacity. Right. So what happens then if you just have a streak there where people aren't committing crimes? You got to arrest innocent people. Or break your contract and get sued. So that kind of stuff, it's a really weird situation there where they scare us with this war on drugs and how drugs is killing everybody and gateway drugs and all this stuff. Just say no. And number one, the war on drugs did not stop drugs at all. It didn't. In my opinion, the government was bringing the drugs in, or turning a blind eye or something. They were involved in it somehow, getting their pockets lined. Somebody was, and so there really was no attempt to end it, right? Because they could have stopped it at the border. They could have stopped all this stuff at the border if they really wanted to. But instead, they let it travel all the way into our cities and our towns, and then arrest the people who are partaking. And that's another way that they used fear to manipulate people in order to make money and to gain control. Okay? And in my opinion, the black population should be the most angry about that, because the population, the prison populations, is some inordinate percentage of black people. And so that there is just a telltale sign that side, that government, the left Democrat, they're racist, right? They're just racist. And that's a telltale sign of it. So we were given this war on drugs, and we were led to believe that we were going to win that war on drugs, right? That our communities were going to be cleaned up and our children were going to be safe. But as we all know, that didn't happen. It's just been an ongoing, endless war on normal people who just, want to smoke some weed or whatever, do whatever. And like I said, I'm about freedom. If some guy wants to live under a bridge and do heroin, that's on him. Let him, if he's not hurting anybody else. Now, if he goes out and robs somebody to get his heroin, then yeah, he needs to go to prison for robbery. But I don't know. A lot of people will probably disagree with me on that, but that's just my opinion. A grown adult should be free to do as they please with themselves. And all of these controls, the war on drugs, the TSA, all these things, right? They're implemented as temporary measures, but then they never go away. They're just endless. Okay? And what does that say? What does that tell us? They're never reversed after the crisis is passed. Okay, if the crisis ever passes, in the war on drugs example, the crisis never passes because they're basically enabling the crisis because it benefits them. But in the examples where the crisis has passed, why didn't they pull back? Why didn't they withdraw that level of control that they implemented? And that tells me that it wasn't really temporary to begin with. It never was. That was just a lie they told us. It was never meant to be temporary. And it was never meant to help the people of any given country. Help the people of the United States or the people of Norway. It was meant to control them, to isolate them, to divide them. That's what these things are for. And so why, are these tests that are given to us like COVID-19? Was that a test just to see how many of us would comply? What percentage of the population would resist those, at the very least, strange commandments handed down from the authorities? Was that the motive of that whole scenario there? Are these tests that are given to us to gauge where we're at as a nation, as a civilization, and to find out how much more they can take, because they need to know how far they can push it, what kind of temporary measure they can install in the next one, right? With the next catastrophe, with the next emergency. How far can we push it? Can we take a bigger scoop of freedom this time, right? Or do we need to back off for a while and just pick away at it? So that's the real question there. What is the motive behind these things, right? The why. Why are they implementing these things, and why don't they ever reverse them? Never. The TSA is still there. The war on drugs, though it's not in the news like it used to be, but it's basically the same, right? We're stirred up constantly. We're constantly hearing about Israel and Palestine and Muslims and all this stuff. We're constantly bombarded with that stuff. And all the climate regulations, they never backtrack on any of that. They never explain any of it. They never go into great detail explaining what they're doing, just like with the Patriot Act. They never broke that thing down for us and explained to us what they were doing and allowed us to vote, right? They never did that. And they never do. They never allowed us to vote whether or not we wanted a TSA. They never allowed us to vote on whether or not we wanted a war on drugs. They never allowed us to vote whether or not we wanted penal institutions to be privatized. None of this stuff. We don't get a say in it. And that's where we're at now. And people, in my opinion, we need to start thinking about this stuff. And even if you don't want to stand up and do something about it, at least we're not being played for fools anymore. At least we realize that it's a game and the jig is up, you know, at the very least. Let's not be suckers anymore. Let's not be dupes. Let's at least know that they're playing these games, that they're doing this shit in the shadows, in the dark, trying to manipulate us. And maybe we can spot the next line of manipulation for what it is. And I'll leave you there with that. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and comment. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a member, I'll leave that link down in the description, or you can head over to the channel page and become a member that way. If you'd like to support the channel directly, you can do so by clicking on that super thanks button down there. Or you can head over to Buy Me a Cup of Coffee and buy me a cup of coffee. I appreciate those of you who do that. Thank you very much. And I'll leave that link down in the description too. If you're interested in Gen X gear, we got some pretty cool stuff over there at Redbubble. Gen X Thinks and Gen X branded stuff, t-shirts, coffee mugs, stickers, all kinds of cool stuff. But I'll leave that link down in the description as well for any of those of you who are interested. If you can't or don't want to support the channel in any of those ways, you can always do so by sharing these videos on your social media. That helps out a whole awful lot, so thank you very much to those of you who do that. I really do appreciate it. If you have any ideas for future episodes of Gen X Thinks, please put those down in the comments, or you can email us, and the email is genxthinks@gmail.com. And as always, stay frosty, Gen X, and I'll see you on the next one.